Good morning, everybody. Good morning. A lot of people, that's what I get. Everybody hear me? Okay. Yeah. All right. We're going to be opening to, if you have your Bible, feel free to open to Matthew chapter 25. And this is one of my favorite passages. And so what my prayer really is for today is that I would communicate this, because there's so much. It's kind of a long passage, and then it's a story. But I think if we hang in there a little bit, and if God wills that He will work through me, that I can communicate it in the right way, because this passage is really awesome, and it has the opportunity to change the way we think about living for God. It's pretty powerful, and it's definitely changed my life. So what I would like us to do before we begin, I know Pastor had prayed, but I'd like to go ahead and just pray again, if you don't mind, real quick. Father, thank you for, God, just being able to be here this morning and to be with CCCG. And we just pray, God, I just pray a blessing on them, God. God, I want them to know about you, and I don't want them to see you, God. I want them to see you. So I just pray that would happen, and that you would make your word, God, which you've written down for us, that we are to pass on to others as a torch. And just make that clear in Jesus' name. Okay, so the title for this morning is The Life Manager. What will you do with what you've been given? Okay, so who is your manager? Okay, so you might feel like, okay, my parents are my managers. I do things based upon what they allow me to do, and they give me an allowance. How many people get an allowance in here? Okay, how many people have chores in here? Okay. I see some adults raising their hand. Okay, so sometimes people have things that they have us to do, and we're to be a steward over them. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but essentially stewardship is an activity or responsibility that you have over something else. Okay, so if your parents give you allowance, they give you chores, you have to do a good job. I know my mom likes to clean the bathroom. My mom likes things clean a certain way. I don't know about your parents, but my mom would be like, nope, you didn't do it right, do it again, do it again. I still don't think I learned that. My wife understands why I'm a little OCD today. So maybe moms feel like, why is the guy up there? This should be me. Okay, I'm the one that's managing things. I got all these things going on. And mom's doing an awesome job today with all the different things that are going on today and balancing those things. So it's your mom, it's your dad. They are helping you to be a good steward for things. So when you get encouraged, whatever that is in life, it can happen at work, different things. We're giving a job or responsibility, and God has placed us in a situation. How are we going to respond in our attitude and in our actions? Okay, maybe it's a teacher. Okay, teachers give you all kinds of homework, right? You got to go to school for 7-8 hours, and then you come home, and then you still have work to do. Okay, and they're expecting you to do it. They're expecting you to do things a certain way. Okay, maybe you feel like these people are all running your life, and they have things for you to do. But what I would suggest to you this morning is, even though God has put them in your life, and they're there for a reason, good or bad, God is the ultimate life manager. And Colossians chapter 1 says, for by Him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible. That means there's stuff going on right here, as we talked about this morning, that we cannot see. There's stuff going on. There's people who are happy that we're here, and there's people who don't want us to gather. Okay? Not just people, it's other things that don't want us to be here and to study God's Word. Whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things consist. And what that means is Jesus created everything. It says that He was there in the beginning, creating things, and He allows things to exist. So He's allowing us to be here this morning and to breathe and all these things because of Him. Okay. So I'm going to read the passage, Matthew chapter 25. You're welcome to stand as we do that. Matthew chapter 25, I'm going to read verses 14 to 30. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with him and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought another 5 talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I've gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I've gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have it, it's yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, Wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own interest. Therefore take the talent from him, and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You may be seated. So, what this is called a parable. Anybody know what a parable is? A parable is a story told by Jesus, but it's more than just a story, because we can read stories. Okay, so we can read Bible stories, and then we can read other kinds of stories, right? Like Nemo and stuff like that, right? I don't think Nemo is a true story, right? So you have different things, but Jesus, when he tells a story, he tells it because there's something real behind it. Remember we talked about in Colossians 1 that there's these other things going on that we can't see? And so Jesus is saying that he's trying to teach us something by things we can see, but he's saying, really, there's something bigger to the story. There's a bigger meaning. And so that's what a parable is. So I want to define a couple things in the story. One is the king, okay? So at first he's a man, right? This guy, he goes and he gives these talents, okay? A talent is, we think of talents, right? We think of like gifts, okay? So I can do music, I can sing, I know my name's Chris Brown, but I can't sing it on music. You'll pay me not to sing. Some people have the gift of just picking things up, picking languages up. People have the gift of computers, that kind of thing. That's how we think of the word talent. But the word talent here really means a ton of money. Okay, it's not 1 coin, it's a ton of money. And in fact, some people think it's as much as 20 years worth of salary. That's a lot of money. Okay? So whatever that is, that's almost half a life savings, I guess, right? And so this guy, this man, he came and he gave 5 talents. Okay, so that big chunk of money was just 1 talent, I just told you that. He had 5 times as much. One guy had 2 times as much, and this third guy had 1. And so what he did was he told them to go and to invest this money, do something with it. And he's going to go and he's going to come back. So what we're talking about is stewardship. We mentioned this earlier. It's the job of protecting or being responsible for something. So a lot of times we just feel like when somebody gives us something, we can do whatever we want with it, right? Okay, so you guys get gifts for Christmas. Somebody had a birthday last night. Happy birthday again. Okay, so she probably got some kind of gift for her birthday, right? And that's something you can do whatever you want with. No? And so, but stewardship is a little bit different because you can't do whatever you want with it. Stewardship is something that was given to you for a purpose so that you can make it better, so you can make it more, so that you can increase it because the thing that was given to you wasn't even yours. And so what happened in those days is this guy, this man who gave these talents to people, he gave this large sum of money to them, he's basically saying, hey, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you so you don't have to worry about other things. But this is what you have to do. You have to invest this money. And when I come back, I'm going to reward you. What are you responsible for? Think about your life. What are the things that you're responsible for? Okay, so we gave the example of parents. So schools will give you a chore, they'll give you an allowance. Okay. God gives us different things. I mean, ultimately, God is giving us all these things. We have homework. Okay, we have the opportunity. How are we going to do it? Are we going to do our best with what we have? Okay. So the servants in this passage, they choose how they spend their talents. So the one who had 5 talents, he went and he traded with them. He got another 5, so he doubled it, right? So he got something back in return. And likewise, the second one, he had 2. He went and he got 2 more. And the one who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground, and he hid his Lord's money. Again, it's his Lord's money. It's not his. Okay. So can you imagine what it would be like if you just did whatever you wanted to? What if you just didn't do your homework? Or what if we just didn't do anything at work? Can you imagine what that would be like? Okay, you think this is what your parents do at work? They have a big party? Okay? So, okay, do you think their boss would allow them to do that? Just do whatever they want, have a party all day? No. So they have a certain job to do. They're given a stewardship by their boss to do certain things. And that's how we have a home, that's how we have food, that's why we have clothes on our back, because of the stewardship of your parents. Or we were given the stewardship at work. Okay, so this is essentially what this guy did with 1 talent. Okay, he went and dug a hole in the ground, and he took his 1 talent and he put it in the ground. He didn't do anything with it. So that would be like if you just didn't do your homework, you didn't do chores, you just laid around and watched TV and do different things like that. But you know what's awesome about God? God is greater than our boss. God is greater than our teachers. And God has given us these things. He's given us different things to invest in. And it's not ours. So whether you have phones or whether you have computers, God wants you to use that to bless Him and to bless other people. And this third servant, what he did was he dug a hole in the ground and he didn't do anything with it. And so that's kind of what God has done for us. God has given the church so much. He's given us this Bible. He's given us, this is how God speaks to us today. A lot of times we're looking for this great experience. I've had so many people tell me, I believe in God if He came down and stood right before me. And I said, man, if you would just spend a little bit of time in here, if you would just ask some questions like I did, and God will bring you to the right person like God did for me, and He will show you what's in it. And it says, in Proverbs, it says that we ought to seek wisdom like gold or silver. You know what they do for gold and silver? They dig for it. Okay, they dig. This guy dug and put it in the ground. But they actually dig and work for it. And so what God has given is He's given us, a lot of people have died over the course of history for this book. And they died for it because they believed it was true and because what was in it was really worth living for. So this guy, he essentially had what we call wasted talent. Have you ever heard of that term, wasted talent? So when somebody has some kind of gift and they just kind of, that's what he does. He digs a hole in the ground, doesn't do anything with it. Okay? And this is a guy who's from Maryland. Anybody know of this name, Len Bias? Len Bias was a basketball player. I think he was drafted number 2. This is years ago, at the University of Maryland. And he was supposed to be a great NBA player. Okay? And Len Bias, the night he was drafted, did drugs for the first time in his life. And he died. He is an example of what is wasted talent. And it can be true of any of us. And you might think, well, I would never do something like that. I would never do drugs. And I've heard people say, why do these athletes throw things away? And I'm like, well, we throw things away all the time. We have talents all the time. And God has given us so much more than we realize. But we don't do anything with it. You know what the problem is? I think the problem is sometimes we feel like we don't have as much as the other person. I think that's what happens to this guy with one talent. And we think, well, I don't have what they have, so I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm going to dig a hole in the ground, I'm going to put it in there and not do anything with it. But what God is saying is He's going to hold us accountable to the things that He's given us. So the king comes back to reward us. Notice it says in verse 19, after a long time. Remember, at first he was the man, okay? At first he was the man in verse 14. Now he's the Lord. Okay? So he's really the king. That's what we're talking about. Okay? Because remember Jesus came as a man. He came as a lamb the first time, right? The Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. And he was silent. He opened not his mouth. And they accused him of all kinds of things that were untrue. But the next time he's coming like a lion. He's going to roar. And he's going to hold people accountable to what we do. It says, after a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. They sat down with him. Okay, I gave you this money. I gave you different things. What did you do with it? So he had received 5 talents. He came, he brought these 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you gave me these 5. Look, I've gained 5 more. And he said, well done. He says 5 things. And this is what's so awesome about God, is God really wants to encourage us. God really wants to give us good things. And He will. And then the best stuff He's going to give us is for later. You know, it's appointed for man to die once, and after that is the judgment. And so, God is going to give us our greatest reward at that time. No man has ever defeated death but one. One day we're all going to die. I don't know when, I don't know how. But because I don't know what's after that, well, I do know what's now. I haven't seen it, but Jesus has seen it. Jesus has experienced it. And He's saying, I'm going to reward you for what you've done. So He says to him, 5 things. Well done. He says, well done. Good job. Don't we like to hear that? You do a good job. Those of you who do chores. Adults, when you do chores, we want to hear from your spouse, yeah, I did a good job. Good job, good and faithful servant. So He says, this is the kind of person you are. This is your character. You are good and faithful to me. Thank you. You did such an awesome job. You are faithful over a few things. And that's interesting. He says just a few things. So this guy who had 1 talent, he didn't really think he had that much. But really, he had a lot. But in his eyes, and then these other guys had 5 talents and 2. We talk about numbers like almost 20 years worth of salary. And he's saying, hey, it's just a little bit. As much as I have, the Lord says, I just gave you a little bit. But because you did a whole lot with that little bit, I'm going to make you ruler over a whole lot of stuff. I'm going to give you what I have. Enter into the joy of your Lord. How many went on vacation last year? Okay. So how many like the beach? Okay. Any campers, any outdoor people? Okay. Couple. So, I mean, doesn't that kind of get us through like work sometimes? We say, man, I want to get to that vacation so I can rest, I can be with my family, and I can do that. Well, you know, and it's not that heaven is just this place where we don't do anything. But it's this idea of joy, it's this idea of being together, it's this idea that God has given us purposeful work. So I know when we go, we take a couple days, me and my family, we do some intentional things as a family with God. We do like if we go to the beach, my brother has a place in Ocean City, so we'll go there once a year for a couple days. And we'll have devotions on the beach. Man, I love that. I love that. So heaven to me is like a million times over kind of glorified version of that, where we get to spend quality time together with God and with His people. And you know, when we meet God, I don't think we'll be in line, like we have to wait. Okay, I'm 4,500 in line to see Jesus or to see Paul or something like that. I think God will transcend time and space, and we'll get to talk to Him face. That's what the Bible says. We'll get to talk to God face to face. And so He's saying, enter into the joy of your Lord. In heaven, there's going to be eating, there's going to be feasting, there's going to be relationships. You know, it says the lamb and a lion will lie down together. Okay? So God didn't create animals to eat people and stuff like that. And one day, it actually says the infant will play with the snake. So there's going to be this beautiful place of heaven, this awesome place that God has given to us. The king also judges the lazy and foolish servant. You ever have that feeling like you go away for a weekend, or you have a really good weekend? You come to school on Monday, or you come to work on Monday, you say, man, I had a great weekend. We had a great weekend at church. Got to hang out with some people, got some good fellowship, watch the game, whatever it is that you like to do on the weekends. And then on Monday morning, you're telling your friends at work, you're telling people at school, man, what an awesome weekend we had. Remember when we did this? We got to go see this movie, whatever it is. And then you realize, oh, shoot. I forgot that song. That's what half my grade. That's a bad feeling. I don't know if you guys ever had that feeling. And it's this feeling that picks your stomach, oh man, what am I going to do? And I think that this guy had that. He really had this pit of his stomach feeling. This guy actually came back. I don't think he thought his Lord was coming back. I think he just dug a hole in the ground and said, well, I'll just leave it there and see if he comes back or not. And he who had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man. Okay, he says several things about this guy that we're going to look at. And I think this is how we look at God. And I don't think it's true of God. I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown. Okay, he's talking about seed, like farmers when they sow seed. Okay, put it on the ground. And he's saying, you didn't even spread any seed. The stuff is growing up. And gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, you have what is yours. Here, there it is. I'm giving it back to you. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my money with interest. So this servant, he completely misunderstands the master by choice. Because the master even says, I'm going to judge you according to what you said. And in verse 24 he says, you make things happen without investing in them. Now, I'm not sure if this is what happens or not, because that's not what's going on. The master is giving them something, each three of these guys, to do something with it. So, I'm not really sure if he understands this, or, some people might say that God is like us in some ways, but I think a lot of times we just expect God to do something. And sometimes we just think, well, if God is God, He's just going to do it, and I don't have any part in that. And that's what this guy says. You've put stuff out there, so I just figured you would take care of it on your own. And if you wanted me to do something with it, you'd make me do it. But God doesn't act like that. God invites us to do His work. And then he says, I was afraid. I was afraid. Anybody in here like horror movies? Anybody like to be afraid? I think people are just so in love with being afraid today. I don't like horror movies. I don't think I did at one time. Obviously, don't think that they're healthy. But a lot of people are like horror movies today. In fact, I'll go once in a while. We'll go to the Red Box and look for a movie, and it's like half of the movies are horror movies. It's like, what is this about? But this guy, he's afraid of his master. He's afraid of God. And I think what he was afraid of is that he wouldn't be successful. What is he really afraid of? He says, I knew you'd be hard. I knew you were tough. I knew you demanded too much. Now listen, has anybody ever felt like that? Like God just expects too much of you. It's not fair. Okay? You don't have to raise your hand, but I know I've felt like that sometimes. Sometimes when I go through something really tough, it's like, God, you want me to act like this, you want me to be loving, and I just don't feel like it. I knew you'd be a hard man. And I was afraid. And sometimes we're afraid. We can just kind of pretend like, okay, well, God doesn't see. If God's not going to do anything, I'm just going to do my own thing. And God will show up when He wants to, if He ever comes back. But the king's response says that he was wicked and he was lazy. He's saying, you didn't do anything. You just kind of sat around with what I gave you. And he didn't invest his talent. And so what he wanted him to do was, okay, so if we have a talent, okay, if you have a talent, what are some of the talents that you guys have? Let me just ask anybody, just raise your hand. Something that you have or something that other people have. What are some things? Come on, I want to hear from you guys. What are some talents that we have? Michelle. Michelle's my default. We have a good relationship. So. What are some talents that people have? You say, okay.
Michelle's a talented runner.
Yeah? Okay. Okay. Runner. What else? So when people come up to you and talk to you about running, you can use that somehow to glorify God. You can tell people about God. You can use that to start a conversation. But thank God that He's given me this ability. And the harder people are going to watch the way that you run. Okay? Same thing we do work. Same thing we do school. The way that we do it in our attitude and in how we do it. Even if we're not an A student, okay, we do our best. Okay? And then what do we do with that? Are we doing that for ourselves? Okay? When we work, are we doing it for ourselves to get stuff for us? Or are we doing it to give to other people? So he says, the least you could do, even if this was true, he's saying, you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would receive back my interest. So, this next verse, he says what's going to happen to the wicked and lazy servant in verse 30. We're going to conclude with this, so I want you to pay attention. In verse 30, this is the ultimate, this is what happens to the guy with one talent. Cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now this is serious. Okay? Not only did he say, you should have done a better job, not only did he say, okay, go stand in the corner for a couple of minutes, he's casting this guy into outer darkness. There's going to be weeping. Weeping is loud and violent crying and gnashing of teeth. And we're in so much pain, we're just grinding our teeth. This is how Jesus describes a person who does not follow Him, does not live for Him. This is their ultimate place. Did you know that Jesus talked more about hell than He talked about love? Some people have a hard time with that. How can a loving God send people to